Hi there, this is Erica Norton, and I am the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. Today, we are going to be talking about a topic that I believe is near and dear to most people's hearts when it comes to divorce and breaking up in general. And so we're talking about roadblocks today, and I wanted to welcome you to the show today, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So I had this idea that we should talk about roadblocks because I am one of your clients, and as I mentioned to you, I spoke with a divorce attorney a year and a half before I ever spoke to you, and you were like the real person that was going to help me through it. But I had obviously been thinking about it for a few years before it happened because things weren't going well, and there were lots of red flags. And I thought that talking to somebody and getting some answers would be a good idea. And it turns out it was a great idea. And then when I was ready, I was able to come to you and get a lot of great information and enough for me to feel comfortable with going forward. So thank you very much.
No problem.
So do you find this to be something that happens a lot where people are thinking about a breakup? And when I say breakup, people have kids, they don't necessarily need to get divorced, they don't necessarily need to be married, but they will still have to go to court. So when I say breakup, usually that's just kids, but then divorce, those are all legally blinding. Is that something that just came up from my subconscious?
Right? Just a little bit.
Oh yeah. So legally blinding documents. So let's talk about that. Do you see this quite often?
I do. I see that there's a lot of issues that really come up, and sometimes it's just, hey, I want to get a flavor for it. Sometimes it's, hey, we've been separated for years, and maybe I should just make the jump. But there's always something holding them back. So we really have to figure out what it is that's holding them back. What's the reason why they're hesitant to move forward? And sometimes it's legitimate, and sometimes it's actually to their detriment if they wait. So it's one of those things that you're better off as soon as you kind of have that inkling of maybe I should at some point have the sit down with the attorney so that we can come up with a game plan that might work for you best rather than you procrastinating, which may hurt you in the long run or may help you.
Oh, for sure, because you never know what could be happening. I mean, the markets are going up and down, real estate, like if you're trying to work on real estate and seeing if that you're going to get a portion of it, obviously you want to get as much as you can out of the assets that you have. Some people don't even know what they have for assets. Which is one of the things that we'll talk about today. So, what are some of the greatest fears that people have that really act as roadblocks to taking that next step and reclaiming their life?
Well, I think the biggest one is, well, how will the kids suffer? And I'm like, okay, so what do you mean by that? And it's usually, well, you know, we'd be living apart and they wouldn't see one of the parents as much. And we're cohesive. And I'm like, really? Are you really? Because I don't know any party that's in my office where the children don't already have a sense that their parents are going through divorce. Whether it's legal or not, there's the snide comments, there's the innuendo, there's the looks, there's the angriness that flares up. So the reality is, you're probably doing a disservice to your child when you think you're shielding him from this situation. So that's always one thing that I have to go really take a hard look. And more importantly, like ask a friend or family member that sees you with your spouse, because they're going to flat out tell you, yeah, your kids know. Like they're not happy because of what's going on. Because that's probably the number one reason why people want to hold off.
I mean, and in addition to worrying about the relationship with the children and the parents after a divorce, is the relationship to the bank accounts and how are they going to pay the bills? Where are they going to live? Those are very scary questions when you're considering getting a divorce.
Absolutely. And that's another thing where, when I sit down with you, I'm going to ask you what each of you are making so that we can run the child support guidelines. We can look and see if there should be an alimony obligation. So we can discuss what that scenario is going to look like because you are going to most likely go from a two household income to a one household income. Now, the question becomes if you're one household income, are you able to get other money such as the child support or an alimony so that you can get that extra support so that you can afford to live on your own.
Absolutely. And most of the time, the concern is really making sure that the person that needs it can still live relatively closely to the way that they used to live with the children, because most of the time the kids get split half and half. That's what the courts want to do. So they want to make sure that the kids aren't going to go from living in Bel Air to living in the slums because that makes things very difficult for the children to adjust.
Absolutely. And that's again why we're going to go through those numbers and figure it out because your best way to determine it is what does that look like? And there's wiggle room and people will have be self-employed and so you're going to make the analysis and go, well, he's going to claim he's making no money, but he really is. That makes it a little bit harder. But as a W-2 employee, it's really simple for the attorneys to run that math.
Absolutely. And there's not a lot you can do about people hiding money if that is something that they're doing and they're good at it. So, I mean, it's better not to worry about something that you can't control. And there are certainly ways that you can handle that if you think that you can prove it. If someone's taking out a lot of cash like every month, then you might be able to say, "Well, can you tell us what you're spending that on?" And if they can't, then that could be part of the settlement is marital income.
Absolutely. And, it's just one of those things that we have to look at the big picture. So we need to start with what does that big picture look like? And again, depending on length of marriage, maybe we can also go for alimony. So it's a lot of things to consider, or maybe we ask for the attorney's fees pende lite so that you can start on a level playing field.
Yeah, attorney fees is another one because a lot of people feel like they just can't afford an attorney. I know several people that have just gone and done their own divorce and they try to put it together, and some of them feel like, well, they have to give up their house or they have to give up their kids or they have to give up child support because the other person's threatening them and saying, look, I'll let you have this if you can have the kids if you don't ask for child support, and I won't ask you what you're doing. I've heard that several times. And then the people just are like, okay, well, I don't want them to have control over the kids. And so they get no support for their kids, which is doing a disservice to the kids because I'm sure that the kids have to give up a lot if they can't be provided for in the way they used to be provided for with two parents.
Absolutely. And, the court won't allow some of that to happen depending on what the incomes are. But, we don't bargain away our children. And the court isn't going to allow you to do that. So, there are things that we can work on, and maybe we can take a reduction, and maybe it does make sense because you're both financially well off and you can do it. But the court is definitely going to have a real keen eye on those types of issues and really focus on is it what is best for the children?
Let's talk about health issues for a second because there have been a few times where I've heard of family and friends that stay in a relationship that is toxic because they are too ill to leave, um, and they just can't live on their own at that moment. And also, there's a lot of concern around health insurance, which is really expensive. And if you have health issues, and you never know when that can happen, you could be struck with something at any time. You want to make sure that you have health insurance to take care of that.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those things that we want to make sure that it's covered. And the other part of that is, what if I don't have health insurance, but I know that I can't afford private health insurance and I don't qualify for mass health. So I might as well again stay married to them. So those are again scenarios that are going to come up. So whether you have the health insurance, the health issues now, or you're anticipating I just can't afford health insurance, and my employer doesn't offer it to me, or things of that nature, you really run that risk. So we have to do that analysis. Maybe what the thing is we go, okay, but if you get divorced, we're going to make sure that your spouse continues with coverage. Maybe it's something that we can do. There are plans that are self-pay and we can't have that luxury. So really we're going to look at that as one of the options. And what's the cost? Because again, if we have children on the plan, there may be no additional cost to keep you on. So go ahead and get divorced. The children are covered, you're covered, there's no additional cost. And if it's not a self-pay plan, then we're hunky dory. So there's a lot of options there. But the problem is it terrifies people to, put their head in the sand and go, I can't deal with it. I just can't. But come see me because we can do that analysis, find out if it's something that we can actually do, and we can have you have the continued coverage that you need.
I mean, and a lot of this is, just helps you with the fear of the unknown. I mean, I feel like my first conversation with you was incredibly eye-opening because you asked me a lot of questions that I didn't know the answers to. And then you start thinking to yourself, wow, like I used to be in charge of my life. I used to know the answers to the questions about certain bills and like how much money was in the account, what I even have, what do we own? I mean, like there are a lot of questions that needed to be answered. And in a way that was more stressful, but also good to know. Good to know that like along with those questions and information that I obviously needed to get, that you were also able to have strategies. Like you said, like there are ways for you to have health care. You might have healthcare, someone like took care of the healthcare for a couple of years after the divorce for you and your child and that sort of thing. So that's really important. Um, Fear of the unknown is how people hang on for too long. Another thing is that like you find out there are people who their house is like a clown car. There's a lot of people living there. And if there's a divorce, then what happens to all those people? And one good example are the elderly people in your life that maybe live with you. I don't think we've ever talked about this before, people breaking up and what happens to the parents that live with them that, because, we're in an age right now, the people that are our age are dealing with taking care of elderly parents right now, in addition to sometimes also taking care of their own children. So it's an interesting place to be, and you're getting pulled in a lot of directions. And what happens now if you are facing possibly not having the same living arrangements available to you and income.
And along with the living arrangements is okay, but this person was my daycare provider. My parents were watching the children when I went to work. So if my parents are living in the same household, or if they have to live across town, how can I financially afford to do that? So that becomes another twist to that scenario. So really, again, we have to look at, well, hopefully maybe their name's on the deed. And sometimes it's owned by the parents, which makes my life a little bit easier because it's not a marital asset anymore. Unfortunately, sometimes husband and wife's on the deed along with the parents. And so now we have to split it up 50-50. And parents are like, we're not moving out of our house. We gave you this house, but it was under the understanding you'd live here forever. And unfortunately, life changes. So we have to look at all of those dynamics. Again, who put down payments in the house? Did the parents contribute? Or the parents just, the caretakers? Are your parents the ones that need the help and you need to care for them? Do you have a certification and are you legally their caretaker? So we're going to look at all those scenarios, and we can probably spend 5 hours on just that one topic alone as to all the different options. So again, it goes back to, it really depends on the situation and what you're going to tell me, because all of those things are going to be very helpful for me to make a determination as to whether or not we need to have your parents living with you in the future, or you can afford to move on your own, or maybe we can offset it with some other asset that we can give your spouse in lieu of the house. So we have to be creative. And the way that we're creative is I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And sometimes it's I don't know the answer, but we're going to have to find out those answers because that's going to be how we manage to come up with a resolution that's best for you.
We will definitely do this topic in the future because we've also never really talked about that topic with elderly people that are, you know, parents maybe that are living in the home and they're either taking care of the kids or maybe you're taking care of them or, you know, you're trying to kick your wife or your husband out and he's actually the one taking care of the parents and what the hell are you going to do? That's a different definitely an interesting topic and I'll look forward to breaking that down more with you later. But you know, that's it's good to know that you've seen this before. I mean, there's no way you haven't seen it a lot. The other thing is another family member that people don't really think of right off the bat, but can have the possibility of being rehomed, which are your pets. And like I know my neighbor just a few doors down is going through a divorce, selling the house, had two dogs. Uh, she was moving in with her mom down on the Cape or sister down on the Cape, and she couldn't take both dogs. So the realtor actually helped her find a home for the larger dog, which was great. But in the meantime, they were fixing up the house. The dog got out because there were people coming in and out, ran across the street and bit a police officer. Well, she apologized. The police officer was like, "Oh, okay, fine, fine, fine. Like, what the hell, but fine." Next week happens again. Now it's a family with a dog across the street because, like, right across from us is like just a very busy sidewalk. Everyone's out there walking. And really, the dog's in a crazy situation because there's a lot going on. He's probably stressed out. He's not very socialized. There's a lot of stress from the divorce and from his humans and the move. And it was only six. And now her sister did not want to let her bring that dog because it has two bites on it. And she had to put it down. Her dog, like how sad was that? There's so many bad things that can happen. And I know people also fight about who's keeping the dogs. So that's a consideration. It can be terrible for the animals and for the people that love the animals. So what do you typically see when pets are involved in these divorces?
Well, I'm going to tell you that unfortunately, in your scenario, is probably because we got rid of one of the dogs and he was probably trying to go out and find his friend. But he's, my family member, where is he? And unfortunately, that's probably what set it off. Again, with all the unknowns, dogs get just as stressed out as humans. Dogs have the same anxiety as humans. So you really have to understand that when you're going through these changes, sometimes it's okay, we're going to go to doggy daycare now. Or we're going to board you for a while we're moving. Like you need to think about these. Obviously, this is more of a long time term situation, but then you also have to go with, oh my God, I have to move and I have a Rottweiler and he's a wonderful dog. He wouldn't bite and harm anyone. Oh my God, he's a big lazy bug. But at the end of the day, he's a Rottweiler. And now we know if you're renting, that's going to have an impact on insurance. And so a lot of landlords are going to go, nope, not going to happen. So unfortunately, you've got to come up with the scenarios. And again, is it something that your spouse can take him because he is keeping the house? Is it something that you can have a family member take while you're temporarily moving, and maybe you can find another house when your house sells? There's a lot of different scenarios, but yeah, unfortunately, they are family, and sometimes they're not. And that's a little sad too. But I think the reality is, who can care for that dog? And how do the children interact with that dog or that pet? Because that's a huge thing as well. Like, but it's my dog. Yes, but I'm getting the child. And so again, yes, it might be your dog, and unfortunately, you might have to do the right thing by your child too, because sometimes that child is just more attached. And unfortunately, you're an adult. You have to act like sometimes, and you have to suck it up. And I get that you're going to be losing a family member, but we have to run through those scenarios. So, and again, it's there's so many different options out there. And I think that's the sad one is when we get to the point of euthanizing. But I think the other part of that is if you do have to have your ex take the animal, then we can put language in there that says maybe you get dog visitation, or maybe you make sure that if and when you're going to euthanize, I get right of first refusal, so I will make sure I find a home with him, or I will take him even if I can't. So there's a lot of different things we can do if this scenario means I have to give the dog or cat up temporarily or permanently.
And I think that that's really good. And that's something a lot of people maybe don't think of until it's too late because people are probably their worst versions of themselves sometimes during a divorce. And like I know of a family member that took the dogs and gave them away, and the other person wanted to keep them and told her that he brought them to the pound when he really brought them to a breed rescue, and they did find homes, but just told her that they died. And you know I mean, just people can be really, really cruel, and you wouldn't even have imagined that they could be like that. But uh I think that it's worth saying, like, that's one of the things you should think of, having language in those first agreements, those temporary orders that have to do with sometimes your favorite family member, the furry ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem is we say you can't destroy, alter, or convey assets worth X amount of dollars. And X amount of dollars is usually 500 or more, right? So my mutt is personal property. Invaluable, precious, let me be clear. But on paper is worth $100. So they have the right to do whatever they want with it. So if it is something that you find precious, we need to put it in an agreement because unfortunately, animals don't have the same rights when it comes to divorce law. So we need to make sure that we protect them.
Another good topic we can probably talk about for 5 hours, especially since we are both such huge animal lovers. Um, we can talk about Social Security and taxes as well, because there is a tax break for kids, and there's a tax break for being married, and I'm sure a bunch of other things that I haven't thought of that you can tell us about. And sometimes people fight over some of those.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it alone. The one big thing is if you're divorced, you're single. You could be head of household or you could be single, but you can't be married. And if you're married, you can't be single. So that alone is a big issue for a lot of people, especially people that are senior in nature. They know that they're getting a better tax benefit being a married couple and even filing head of household when they have no children. They're screwed. So they're going, no, I don't want to do it. Like the tax ramifications hurt me too much. So you really run into that situation a lot with people that are seniors that really go, this will hurt me more if I'm divorced. It will hurt me more if I lose my retirement benefits because I'm now single. My spouse won't get that extra money that they're now getting because we've allocated it to both of us. So it's really something that really comes into play when you're talking about senior people that are getting divorced. Obviously, they usually don't have younger children at this age bracket, but they could. But the reality is, they're looking at it going, but my income will be diminished because I'm going to lose his pension. I'm not going to be able to claim them on taxes. I'm going to lose those things. At the end of the day, Nicole, I'm going to lose $20,000. And $20,000 when you're on a fixed income is huge. So we really have to kind of do that analysis. And sometimes it is, okay, it's cheaper to stay married. But then let's talk about a legal separation, in which case you're still legally married. So there are ways to get around that if you really just want to get out of that situation, but still have the benefits of staying married.
Well, I mean, it sounds like really the best thing for you to do is to make an appointment with Nicole and her team if there are some questions that you have about your relationship that you think might be ending. And if there's a lot of people and furry critters that depend on you and you want to make sure that everyone's covered with healthcare and covered with a place to live and food to eat and all that stuff, and you just don't know, like, what you don't know. I would say definitely give Nicole and her team a call because a lot of those answers can give you a huge peace of mind. I mean, you're not going to like every single answer, of course, but a lot of times it's not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Education is knowledge. And that's what I'm trying to provide you with, the knowledge so that you can make the decisions, because you need to have the numbers. You need to know what the consequences are, because we all understand you can't be in this situation anymore. But can you afford not to be in the situation anymore is the real question. So again, we want to do that analysis and figure out where you're going to fall. And I'll do best and worst case scenario with you. So we're not going to, just go, hey, well, let's figure it out. No, let's figure out what we actually have. Let's figure out what the best case scenario is. Let's figure out the worst case scenario is. And then let's figure out what we can live on if it is the worst case scenario.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for coming on today and talking about this huge topic that is probably going to have some offshoots of topics for future interviews. And I'll look forward to those too in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Nicole. Really appreciate your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day.